Galactic Coalition Classified Research File 28G. UAO Communication Trial 7. The Cure. Clearance Level Black Hole. Author, former Dr. Shewik Seflin. Trials 5 and 6 yielded little of interest. The UAOs on Quetha 1 and Halvan 4th were by and large copies of Trial A in personality. Without any major breakthroughs, public interest in my project has died down somewhat, though public and private funds continue to pour in. Financial records indicate my project to be among the most well-funded endeavors in Coalition history. This is, of course, for good reason. The work I do here may very well determine the fate of civilization in the Milky Way galaxy. For this trial, I have selected the Lakai system. This G-class star system attracted my attention due to the presence of two UAO-dominated worlds. Interestingly, one of these worlds, Lakai II, possesses a massive orbital debris field likely originating from some ancient impact. This feature should have heavily reduced, if not eliminated altogether, the odds of UAO infection. And yet both planets here bear the telltale signs of domination. Unfortunately, a series of bureaucratic failures has temporarily limited my access to death row prisoners. Instead, I was given permission to make an open request to hospitals for any terminal patients willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of our galaxy. With the Coalition's medical technology, there are very few conditions that cannot be rectified. However, certain rare diseases remain outside the boundaries of our knowledge. To my surprise, I actually received word from multiple volunteers. The one I selected is Pevranthukis, a Breknar like myself. His condition is exceptionally rare among our species, and as such we have yet to come up with a cure for it. On our journey here, I have asked Pevron for confirmation that this was what he wanted no less than 3 times. His answer remained affirmative. Launching Thukis down onto the surface of Lakai 4, many of the crew averted their eyes from the cameras at first, hoping to be spared the sight of an innocent man's death. 20 seconds later, the UAO found Pevron and engulfed him. Interestingly, however, none of the instruments monitoring the volunteer's vitals indicated digestion. Instead, after approximately 10 seconds, the UAO released him. 4 hours later, Thukis entered the pod and began to speak to us in a pitch inconsistent with his previous register. Audio transcript. Dr. Seflin. Yes, Thukis? Are you feeling all right? The behavior of this thing is anomalous for a UAO. Pevranthukis is not the one speaking to you. I have linked myself up to his nervous system and assumed direct control. So you're the UAO? Correct. This one you have sent me is afflicted with a terrible illness. No matter, I've already begun repairs. Why haven't you consumed him? I'm not sure. I've healed so many that I suppose it came as second nature. What do you mean healed? What did you do to the sapients of this planet? When I found the Garrosh, they were little more than animals, violent and dull creatures that killed each other with sticks and stones. Those who bore witness to my myriad forms proclaimed me as a demon, a shape-shifting malevolence that sought only their destruction. Of course, they were already in the process of extinction when I came along. A deadly virus common to their preferred prey jumped species and was wiping them out. So what? Were you jealous that something would kill them before you could? Jealous? No, annoyed. You see, when I formed my first sensory tower and looked skyward, I discovered very quickly a second planet ripe with life to consume. However, that damnable debris field I knew would ultimately thwart any attempt to seed it. For this, I would need something more advanced than my kind's usual methods. These cave people were primitive and crude, unmolded clay waiting to become a masterpiece. I'm not so sure I follow you. In the valley where my biomass cultivated, a desperate mother, the healer of her tribe, approached me. In her darkest hour, she beseeched the darkness itself for aid, promised me anything I wished if I would only cure her 3 dying children. Did you? Yes, and so much more. With her as the voice of the Garrosh people, I offered a deal. Not only would I lift the dreadful curse that had befallen her young, not only would I heal her entire tribe, I would grant her people 1,000 years of my protection, my favor. So you extorted them, held their entire species hostage to help you spread. Extorted? I cured them, Doctor. Spreading out and infecting the tribes, I made them immune to the virus that would have rendered them extinct. Then, with some subtle alteration of neurochemical balance, I curtailed their violent tendencies. The tribes united and a great civilization was born. And what did you ask of them in return? Worship? Tribute? No, Doctor. I asked that they thrive. Under my gentle guidance, they built wonders, harnessed electricity, split the atom, and with nary a war between them. They thrived for those 1,000 years. They did not understand the gift I had given them, but they accepted it nonetheless. They injected my cells into their newborns to ensure their health, and not a word was spoken between us for centuries as I guided their eyes to the stars. Finally, when at last the Garrosh manned a mission to the planet I could not reach, they brought with them a fragment of my biomass. What did you do once you reached Lakai, too? The sapient natives looked upon my tools, the Garrosh, as gods. The Garrosh met them with the gift of my blessing, and I spread between them just as I did with my first project. After 2 more centuries of peace and coexistence, the time had come for me to reap what I had sown. Go on. I get the feeling I know where this story ends. Their deaths were painless, Doctor. Euphoric, even. They served me well, and as thanks I granted them perfect peace. There was no resistance. No struggle. It was like flipping a switch. Before either planet could complete a rotation, both the Garrosh and the Yokul had overdosed on their own pleasure chemicals. You brainwashed, then euthanized 2 entire sapient species, and you call that peace? It's genocide, nothing more. It was a transaction. I gave them centuries of utopia, devoid of war and illness. They, in turn, granted me a feast. Recall that without my assistance, the Garrosh people would have died out before they even developed writing. I prolonged their existence, improved upon it. The consent of one desperate parent hardly equates to that of an entire species. The Garrosh you dealt with offered you lives she didn't own. Your kind always recoils at the moment of harvest. That's fine. I don't require approval, only biomass. Now, Doctor, from what I've gathered sifting through Pevron's thoughts, you're going to ask me how you can defeat my kind. Am I correct? Yes. If you assist me in this matter, then I will see to it that your system is spared. Nature doesn't create perfection. All organic life has a weakness. All I ask is that you tell me what yours is. What are you expecting, Doctor? Do you think we unravel in the presence of holy symbols? Perhaps some kind of magic rock can kill us. Have you tried that? Mockery won't spare your life. Your species is a blight upon our galaxy, a sickness that must be excised. Help me, and you will be rewarded with continued existence. Don't you see, Doctor? We are not a sickness. We are the cure. Now take this vessel and depart from me. I have grown weary of your wanton chatter. End audio log. Following the conclusion to our exchange, the UAO retreated from the drop site and allowed us to recover Pevron Thukas. Interestingly enough, Thukas reports his chronic pain to be largely gone now, and various medical examinations conducted upon him all suggest that his illness is gone. Following some negotiation, we reached an agreement with Pevron and his family. They will receive the payment as promised in exchange for vowing silence on this matter. As for the UAO interviewed, I have marked it as low priority for extermination in hopes that we may eventually be able to conduct a more thorough investigation of its healing abilities. September 2nd, 2025. With my biomass network continuing to spread between cities, humanity was beginning to take notice of my repeated intervention. Aerial video footage from Pierre, South Dakota released of my third body, halting a high-speed vehicular chase between a fleet of immune cells and a small malignant group. Lashing out a tendril to knock the car off course, I was able to redirect it into a nearby thick tree, halting it without any significant damage to the surrounding area. As my bodies spread out to cover as much ground as possible and assist the human body when necessary, so too did sightings of me increase in frequency. If nothing else, it was rather fascinating to watch how the larger human immune system responded to me. Following the incident with the fire in Rochester, multiple first responders and any survivors that had come into direct contact with me were placed under quarantine. Most likely, the suited ones had gotten a hold of them and were attempting to glean from them information regarding my nature. They would find nothing, of course. With my main form sitting aboard the bus to Chicago, I soon found my attention falling to the other fragments of my network. With each new city-spanning node, thought processes taking place within me became more advanced. Already I was planning a contingency in case the American body opted for open warfare with me. The likelihood they could eliminate me entirely grew less and less significant with each new city my biomass seeded. Diplomacy was naturally the most desirable option, minimizing damage to my overall mass as well as loss of human life. That being said, for all their virtues, humans were a domineering species. It was unlikely they would accept anything less than total control of me. Should diplomacy, as well as the backup and tertiary plans preceding it, fail, however, I would be forced into open confrontation. Though far from desirable, this potential outcome nevertheless had to be planned for. Most tools of human warfare would be borderline useless against me. Their guns barely constituted an inconvenience, and most of the other weapons used by humanity exploited similar principles that simply did not apply to me. For this longer-than-usual journey between human cities, I was fortunate to secure a seat on board a bus that had its own Wi-Fi hotspot. Though slower than the stationary networks I found in cafes and restaurants, this connection was nevertheless serviceable for surfing the web, as the humans referred to it. With my presence no longer a mere curiosity, the more specialized American antibodies were beginning to, well, panic. The Centers for Disease Control, a subsystem of the United States body dedicated to containing pathogens, had apparently begun to activate emergency protocols. Meanwhile, the human who spoke for the Department of Defense promised to deploy specialized immune cells to all cities in which I had been cited as part of an effort to contain me. All of this was to be expected. Humans were naturally fearful creatures, and it only made sense for the governing bodies they created to display similar anxiety regarding the unknown, of which I remained a part. Whereas the federal response was entirely predictable, however, I found the public's reaction to be much more complicated. Some vocally supported their government's promise to capture me, many even going further to suggest I should be eliminated altogether. Others, however, took notice of my non-hostile activities and supported a less aggressive approach. Seated directly in front of me on the bus, a young human man watched on his phone as footage played of my fourth body pulling an injured human from a vehicular wreck, ripping their car's stuck door off of its hinges with a thick tendril before reaching inside to retrieve the driver. That footage was from 5 hours ago. After injecting the injured driver with my cells to ensure they survived, I had been quick to leave the scene. As such, I did not know anyone had recorded the event. Curiosity soon enough overwhelmed my caution as I leaned against the back of the human seat and mimicked the sound of clearing my throat. "What are you watching?" I asked. For a moment, the man looked around him, as though expecting somebody else to answer. When it became obvious, however, that my words were meant for him, he met my gaze with subtle confusion. "The news! Haven't you heard what's going on?" That," I affirmed carefully, maintaining what the humans considered an even tone in hopes to avoid drawing the man's suspicion. "Yes, I've heard. Lots of people seem rather afraid. What about you?" "Can't say for sure." The stranger shrugged before closing the news video and tapping on another social media application. Scrolling through the various posts, he paused on one that displayed an image of me captured during the Rochester fire. "My dad says it's the Antichrist, come to herald the end times or some shit. Of course, he's always been a bit of a conspiracy nut. Whatever it is, it's definitely not human." Such claims as this one's father made were not wholly out of place amongst the rest. In the days since beginning my more public activities, some religious organizations had already begun attempting to correlate me with their forces of good and evil. I held no interest in such wild speculation, as claims of divinity held no utilitarian value to me. "What is it that you believe?" I insisted, hoping to get a better read on this particular human's reaction to my existence. "Honestly?" The man sighed, momentarily setting down his phone after pausing the video. "I'd like to believe it's on our side. It hasn't done anything openly hostile yet, and given what people have seen it do, it's not like it couldn't if it really wanted to." "So what makes you hesitate?" I probed further, watching the human's reaction intently as he prepared to offer a response. In Fargo, a handful of my cells sequestered in the sewer lit up with photoreceptive activity as a manhole cover opened to allow inside 5 individuals dressed in white biohazard suits. "Those workers said they saw something down here matching ET1's description," one of them began, turning on their flashlight and shining along the walls. Fortunately, my biomass was sufficiently concealed to prevent instantaneous detection. Our orders are to collect a living sample of its cells. Meanwhile, on the bus, the human I spoke with finally seemed to come to a conclusion. I'm actually going to be getting my master's in evolutionary biology at the end of this year, he explained, this piece of information contextualizing the knowledge he possessed. I know how bodies are supposed to work. Whatever this thing is, it defies the biomechanical principles of life on Earth. The closest thing I could compare it to is a slime mold, but we've never seen one of those nearly this advanced. And, I inquired further, curious as to how my capabilities affected this one's viewpoint of me. Clearly it's not from any ecosystem we know of, the young human continued. Some of my buddies think maybe it's been hibernating somewhere and only recently woke up, but we don't have any records of anything like this existing anywhere in Earth's phylogenetic history. I have a different theory. Have you ever heard of panspermia? No, I lied, figuring it best to feign ignorance wherever possible to avoid drawing this human's suspicion. In truth, I had learned about this theory during my brief foray into researching alien life on the internet. Reaching into a backpack beside him, the man produced a thick tome and began flipping through it until he arrived at the image of a small meteorite striking Earth. Basically, panspermia is the idea that life forms from some planets might be seeded onto others via meteorite. I always thought it was a bit far-fetched. After all, a life form would have to be beyond durable to survive entry into another atmosphere. That being said, this thing's apparent biology suggests that it might have what it would take to pull it off. So you believe this organism is from another planet? I asked, further feigning ignorance. If it is, what about that makes you interpret it as a threat? He sighed, flipping a few chapters ahead within the book to a representation of human evolution, beginning with a more standard ape, and showing how, stage by stage, it became what humans were today. We humans evolved in a very hostile environment. The African savannas were among the deadliest terrestrial ecosystems on Earth when we came about. When we eventually found our way to less harsh environments, the native life couldn't really keep up. In short, we're an invasive species. Whatever this thing is, it came from an environment more intense than we've ever seen. What happens now that it's on Earth? Much as I did not like his conclusion, there was no debating the logical soundness of this human's assessment. Invasive species did not request permission to enter a new ecosphere. They simply arrived. Even still, I began respectfully, appreciative of this one's knowledge. It would seem that this one is beneficial at least. Maybe, they concluded with a sigh before finally turning to face me head-on. Their eyes were a piercing green, a rare feature among humans. My name's Victor, by the way, he told me, extending his hand to initiate the human gesture of mutual respect. Sam, I replied, returning the gesture with a shake. Trekking down a long tunnel in Fargo, the Desta agents shone their flashlights all around them in search of evidence that I was present. "Look at this!" the first of them shouted to the others, their flashlight falling still upon a vein of my camouflaged biomass. "This isn't mold," they affirmed, producing a small plastic bag and a knife. For a moment, I debated simply allowing them to obtain a sample and leave. However, the risks of doing so were too great to justify. Through studying a fragment of my active cells, it was possible, though unlikely, that they might discover a means of truly harming me. Their isolation from the public meant that I could dispose of them with ease. However, overwhelmed by curiosity, I decided instead that I would take the risk of communing with these ones. Taking a few seconds to form a replica mouth using my sequestered biomass, I spoke out at the very same time as the small knife pierced my biomass. "Greetings, suited ones.